Hello and welcome to the second lesson of Beautiful Chord Progressions with me, Fake Dr. Levin. In the first lesson I showed you an intuitive way to write your own chord progressions, and in this lesson I want to show you one specific chord progression that's so common it's used in tons and tons of songs. But I also want to show you how to use it in different keys and how to make it your own and use it in your own music. So the chord progression, let's start out by learning it in G major, and the accompanying transcription for this lesson has examples in the key of G major. So this progression in G major is as follows. First you play a G major chord, then a D major chord, then an E minor chord, and finally a C major chord. And the progression sounds like this. So it might sound familiar to you, and that's because it probably is. Here's a list of a bunch of examples of songs that feature this progression. So the basics of this progression are, first you have a major chord. And in this case we have the G major chord, and in the key of G, a G major chord is called the 1 major chord because in a G major scale, G is the first note. So G is the first note, therefore G major is the 1 major chord. Here's a G major scale. G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. And you'll notice that G is the first note. 1 major, G major. Now next it goes to D major. Now we're still in the key of G even though we've switched chords, so we have to count up the G major scale. G is 1, A is 2, B is 3, C is 4, D is 5. So D is 5, therefore the D major chord is the 5 major chord. So first we had the 1 major chord, now we have the 5 major chord, D major. Next it goes to this E minor. So you want to think, alright, so what do you call the E minor chord? Well, it's the G is 1, A is 2, B is 3, C is 4, D is 5, so E is 6. Well, therefore, we're going to call E minor the 6 minor chord because E is the 6th note in a G major scale, and we are in the key of G major. So we've played the G chord, which is the 1, the D chord, which is the 5, the E minor chord, which is the 6, and finally we're going to play the C major chord, which is the 4. G is 1, A is 2, B is 3, C is 4, C major, 4 major, 1 major, 5 major, 6 minor, 4 major. That is your formula for this progression. Now, why is it important to have a formula? Well, if you have a formula, you can just copy that formula into other keys and play the progression in other keys using that formula. So in this case, we were in the key of G major and we played 1 major, 5 major, 6 minor, 4 major. If we're in the key of E major, we're still going to play 1 major, 5 major, 6 minor, and 4 major, but the numbers 1, 5, 6, and 4 will correlate with the 1, 5, 6, and 4th note of the E major scale. So now we're in the key of E major, so the E major scale is E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, C sharp, D sharp. And therefore, E major is the 1 major chord. And then if we want the 5 major chord, we go E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B is 5, 5 major, B major. And if you want the 6 minor chord, you have to go E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, C sharp is 6. And then finally the 4 chord, 4 major, A, E, F sharp, G sharp, A is 4. So the progression in E major is as follows. Minor, 6, A major, 4, there's an example of how you can take a chord progression and move it to another key by finding its formula. In this case, 1, 5, 6 minor, 4. So now let's talk a little bit about how you can take a chord progression that's used all the time like this and make it your own. Well, it turns out that even if you take the same chord as, like, let's say this G major here, and you play it in different voicings, voicings being the number of notes and position of the notes within the chord. So for example, this is a different voicing of G major, or this is a different voicing. Like, how about this one? Or this one? These are all different voicings of the G major chord because they have the same notes as a G major chord, but different amounts of notes and different orders of notes, and played, in this case, on guitar on different strings. So everywhere you voice a chord, it really changes how that chord feels. Even if we look at the G major cowboy chord I was playing earlier, if you exclude the high strings and just play these low strings, it sounds so dark and mellow. Now, a song with this kind of a vibe or feel would be much different than a song with this kind of feel. Or you could say, maybe we'll start out the song with this low, mellow vibe, and then I'll start playing all 6 of the notes in this chord when I want to build things up. So the way you voice a chord strongly influences how those chords feel and sound. Therefore, if you mess around with different ways of voicing a chord and different rhythms to play with them, you can take a chord progression that sounds kind of generic and make it sound less generic. In fact, you can use it to make your own sound. So in this case, let's take all these big open chords here that we've been playing and turn them into small mellow voicings like this. And I'm going to use like a nice fingerstyle rhythm, one of those generic fingerstyle rhythms, but that sound beautiful nonetheless. So let's see what happens if I play this chord progression with the same chords but in different voicings and different rhythms. It'll sound something like this. So something as simple as learning many ways to play each chord that you know can result in all kinds of creative options and creative depth to the chord progressions you've learned. You can use the same chord progression many times in many different songs if you treat it a little differently. It won't sound like you're repeating yourself too much. In the transcription that comes with this lesson, you'll find the cowboy chords version of this progression in G major. You'll also find the low voicing fingerstyle version. And you'll also find a version of this chord progression where I took a similar concept as the one I showed you in lesson 1 and applied it to this progression. So I just took the basic 2-note shape that had the root of each chord in the bottom, and I used perfect fifths for my 2-note shape, and I moved it around over these notes being the constant. So last time we were talking about having one structure that moves around while another one stays constant. In this case, I took a kind of rough sketch of the chord progression here, which is, instead of playing all the full voicings like I was doing, I just played these voicings. And I applied these open drones on top, so you end up like with something like this. Which still spells out the same chord progression ultimately, but with a much different of course, there is a lot to learn on an instrument, and one of the best things you can do is learn lots of ways to voice the chords that you like, learn lots of different chords to play, and that will be hugely helpful for writing chord progressions, and it'll be hugely helpful for applying these concepts. But don't get too worried about exactly what I'm doing. Instead, spend your time focusing on playing the examples that I provided and trying to take these concepts and apply them to whatever chords you already know, and add the chords from the transcription into your toolkit of what you already know. So I hope that this chord progression provides you with many hours of songwriting bliss. I'll see you next time.